Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, I have the pleasure of welcoming back Creeks and Peaks. You're in for a real treat, because tonight we're hosting a competition to win this amazing piece of signed artwork. All you need to do is make sure you are subscribed to both me and Creeks and Peaks, have the bell icon clicked, and drop a like and a comment on both videos, as this is a two-part collaboration. Once you've done that, you're all set for a chance to win. Good luck. Relationships can end for many reasons. Perhaps they weren't right for you. Perhaps they didn't want to watch Game of Thrones. Or maybe it's because once you got to know them, they were downright crazy. It's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I met a guy when I was 18 and fell in love fast and hard. We dated, moved in together, got engaged, and eventually got married. But every time we took a step forward into our relationship, he got a little bit meaner. However, it was just enough to make me think that perhaps I was being a bit too overly sensitive. So I brushed it off. It'd be little things, like he'd yell over dumb stuff, or start hitting the walls when I made him mad, or fight me on really small things. He'd also become a lot rougher when we would play around, to the point where he once actually pinned me down and tried to suffocate me with a pillow. I was young, dumb, and in love, and believed him when he said he was sorry and that he was just messing around. His drinking also picked up quite a bit. He got angry when I said anything, so I held my tongue. On Christmas Eve 2011, he drank so much that he passed out in his mum's foyer. I spent the night cleaning up his puke so that he wouldn't drown his face in it, and dodging his fists whenever he realized I was nearby. I cried as he said some of the worst things he'd ever said to me, but I stayed because we hadn't been married all that long. Fast forward to my 26th birthday party in January 2012. We went out with some friends and had a great night. That is until someone asked me a question about sports. I don't really pay attention to them, but my husband started screaming at me for being a fat, ignorant bitch because I didn't remember the score when the Giants won the World Series. Seriously. On the way home, he brought it up again. Then, in a fit of rage, swerved our car into oncoming traffic. Luckily, I pulled the wheel back in time so that we weren't hit, and it was a close one, and I did my best to calm him down. When we got home, he was still furious and began throwing things and screaming at me. He opened the knife drawer, and I booked it upstairs and locked myself in the guest bedroom. After 15 minutes of pounding and kicking on the door, he gave up and drank until he passed out. Over the course of the next 5 days, my friends came over to help me move out while he was at work. I filed for a divorce, and the twat had fought me every single step. I'm still waiting for the divorce to be finalized, but now I have an attorney to do my fighting for me. Douche.
When I was younger, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder at 14. It was very difficult for me to socialize with people in person, so I turned to the internet. There, I stumbled into the world of toy-based role play. It became my passion and even set me on the path towards becoming the artist I am today. My original interest was Dragon Age, and I joined an RP group in DeviantArt. I loved that group and spent all my time in the IRC chat, which naturally led to a decline in my grades. But I met Michael after I gained a bit of an interest in Slenderman. I had stumbled across the blog space RP world of Slender blogging and followed as many as I could, dedicated a Gmail to it, and dived in, creating my own Slender blog. I played a character that was basically myself, even sharing my own name. I would even frequently post little videos of myself running through the woods, or even just talking to the camera. Michael was another player and his character was on the enemy team. You see, I played what was known as a runner, or someone who was fleeing the eldritch horror, and he was a proxy, which is a servant of Slenderman. The kicker was that he was more than just a grunt, and was basically one of Slenderman's elite soldiers. Regardless, we ended up chatting over email, but he never broke character, so I didn't either. We continued to play with each other for over a year, before I ended up breaking character to another player, who was friends with Michael as well. He, of course, immediately told Michael, "Oh my god, she's not insane," as we had all kinda thought everyone else actually thought this stuff was real. So Michael messaged me, excitedly announcing that he wasn't insane. We quickly became pretty close personal friends, and referred to that moment as the best moment in RP history for most of the time we knew each other. We talked on an almost daily basis, and he always seemed to go out of his way to match my schedule, even though he lived 2 hours behind me. And I was a 15-year-old high school student by this point, so I was getting up at 5:30 every morning to go to school. He was pretty honest with his age, and being mature for my age, it didn't bother me that he was 19, almost 20, and I was 15. It was pretty close to the end of the year when we started talking out of character, so summer break came quickly. That just opened the door to us talking all the time. I remember one night he convinced me to stay up and video chat with him for the first time. I'd never actually seen his face before, and I was ecstatic. I hid in my closet and we talked all night. My dad busted in at 4 in the morning and confiscated my computer, which I was not allowed to have in my room at night after that point, but I just ended up giving Michael my phone number and we grew closer. Later, I told him that I didn't think he was capable of surprising me, and he responded by asking me out. Being a 15-year-old girl, I was ecstatic. My friend did well to ground me and think it through, and he'd be nothing if not a gentleman to me. So after a 45-minute walk with my friend, I called him and ecstatically told him yes. He had, during that time, sent me so many texts expressing his concern that he'd upset me. I ended up apologizing profusely for making him wait. The first few months were amazing. We were so close and talked every night on the phone, even sleeping while still in a call. I fortunately had unlimited text and call, but it got weird once the school year started back up. Over the summer, I'd been able to dedicate pretty much all of my time to him, and with school, it would limit the time we could talk to each other quite a bit. It didn't occur to me at all that talking to someone for near on 18 hours a day was an unhealthy dependency issue. So, we had our first argument about texting. He wanted me to text him whenever I wasn't able to be in call with him, but I wasn't allowed to text in class. We came to a compromise when I told him that I would text him between classes and call him at lunch. I didn't really have any friends at that school, and the ones I did have didn't share my lunch period, so it didn't affect my social life that much. It went well for a while, until I ran into an old friend from my middle school who happened to be a guy. I'd always gotten along better with guys than girls, but Michael freaked out. I had been on the phone when it happened and had brushed Michael off to talk to him. After my friend and I parted ways, I was harshly told off and told that I couldn't talk to other guys. I was completely shocked and tried to explain that the guy had been a friend of mine. Michael then had a complete breakdown and told me that his ex had cheated on him and that he couldn't trust any other guy to behave around me. He was terrified that I'd be stolen. He even cried. I was upset, but I agreed to mollify him and began to avoid my male friends whenever I was on the phone, which was a lot. Quickly, schoolwork got pretty heavy and it would take me longer and longer to call him after school. He began accusing me of not loving him enough to talk to him and claimed that he never had enough time with me. He gave me the option of texting him in class or calling him as soon as I got home from school. I went with the latter, which completely cut off any time that I spent with my family, save for a brief dinner, after which I immediately returned to my room. Things only escalated from there. I would get held after class for falling asleep because he kept me up all night, and he could explode at me for not contacting him the moment the bell was scheduled to ring. He had a written copy of my exact schedule to the minute, and any deviation would freak him out. I began pushing away all my friends as he didn't approve of any of them. He even claimed that a particular friend was the human personification of a demon that was trying to kill him. His mental state was revealed to be extremely fragile, and he told me that he had a second personality, whom was quite literally his Slenderman character named Strider. Michael spoke frequently of this constant battle to keep Strider under the surface, because while he wasn't a bad person, he was irrevocably a major douchebag. He blamed his outbursts on this character and even texted me in italics as Strider, as if his body has been taken over for the sole purpose of belittling a 15-year-old girl over the phone. I was sympathetic as my bipolar was at its worst and my therapist was whispering the word schizoaffective to my mother when she thought I couldn't hear. For the next year and a half, he played me like a puppet, distancing me from my family and friends, convincing me that the teachers only wanted to turn me into a mindless tool for the government, and persuading and coercing me into performing sexually for him. It felt disgusting, but he promised me that he'd marry me and would have beautiful children. He was frequently abusive, but he would quickly get better, and suddenly everything would be perfect again until it deteriorated into another explosive argument. Eventually, he convinced me to call cops on my family and report them for abuse. Now, I won't claim that my family was perfect. My dad is an alcoholic and he could get really violent, and he and I had vicious arguments. My mother mostly just supported whatever my dad did, and I was always incredibly resentful that she wouldn't defend me, even when my dad slapped me, kicked me out of the house barefoot, and was generally overly aggressive to me. But they did care, and my home was clean, warm, well stocked with food. My sisters and I never really wanted for much physically, and we often got things we wanted to. The system would have destroyed my sisters, who were pretty young at the time. When my parents found out that I'd placed a call, I panicked and ran away from home, crashing at my friend's house. Michael wanted me to stay put until he could get a friend of his from Austin to come get me. But when I turned on my phone in the morning to see the text from my family, I knew that I had terrified my sisters and the police had been called. I arranged for my dad to bring me home. I wouldn't let him pick me up from my friend's house because I knew he could threaten to sue her parents for assisting me. I served 6 months of juvenile probation and had to endure several meetings with a state-appointed therapist for falsely accusing my family of abuse, and my parents were subject to a second inquiry from CPS due to me running away. By the end, we were breaking up every other week and getting back together when he would send me pictures of terrible gouges in his arms, threatening to kill himself. I actively hated him by then, but still loved him and didn't want him to die. I escaped when he discovered that I'd been talking to a male friend who he particularly hated and dumped me on Valentine's Day. It took him 2 months to realize I wasn't coming back, but he would still try to text me, and I blocked so many numbers and email accounts because he would change them just to message me. It was completely terrifying, and I was constantly terrified because he knew my address. But eventually he disappeared, and I slowly started trying to put my life back together. About a year or so ago, he texted me and I indulged with him. He claimed that he'd been married. I really doubted it. Despite the single picture that he sent, I asked what date his wedding had been on. But he couldn't tell me, and first tried to claim that it had been in December, 2 months before he dumped me. When I called him on it, he backpedaled and got defensive. I blocked him after that, satisfied that he was still a miserable mess and that he hadn't snared another poor minor. So Michael, let's not meet.
I was engaged to my high school sweetheart, who I pretty much allowed to treat me like dirt. After high school, while we were living together, it was apparent that the relationship wasn't going anywhere, and I finally had the courage to end it. I was the one with the job and the money, so I was keeping the apartment and asked her to move out. I think I gave her about 2 weeks or something. Eventually, she shacked up with some guy and was out of my hair. Every now and then, she would pop in because she left all of her shit at my place while she was trying to find her new place. I kept hearing stories from everyone of her epic levels of sluttiness and just tried to stay away from it all as best I could. At some point though, out of anger, I went into her jewellery box and took the engagement ring that I had given her. It was several weeks before she realised it was gone, at which point I'd already sold it, and when she confronted me about it, I told her. She lost her shit. She started demanding that I give it back to her, or at least its value in cash. I told her that's not how engagement rings work and that she can go screw herself. She started hitting me and trashing my place. I didn't have to take it. She was smaller than I was, and I was a black belt, and I just let her take her anger out. She ripped my shirt, slapped me, punched me, kicked me, everything. Finally, she hit me square in the face and drove my head into the door behind me. On the other side of the door was a calendar hanging on a nail that struck through the door just a small amount, but enough to drive it to the back of my skull, and it really hurt. I just grabbed her hands to stop her from flailing about anymore and directed her over to the door. She could tell that I had lost my patience, so she just stormed out. About an hour after, she shows up with her mother and the police. The cops took my statement, took one look at me and asked if I wanted to press charges or if I needed an ambulance. I declined both, and then he escorted her and the mother off the property and advised that they take it up with a small claims court if they wanted to proceed any further. But it was more hassle than it was worth, and she didn't really break anything, just made a mess, and I had a cut on the back of my head, which looked worse than it was since it was bleeding pretty good. I just wanted her gone at that point.
Background. My mom dated a guy, Will, when my oldest sister and I were much younger. I was about 3 and my sister was about 9. They had been dating for a couple of years until she figured out he had been doing hard drugs, so she broke off the relationship. He didn't take this too well and started stalking her, which leads us to the story I'm about to tell. In the beginning, it wasn't that bad. She would coincidentally run into him places, as well as receive numerous phone calls each week asking for her to go back to him. Each time, she said no because he still was not sober. This frustrated him, and soon things got worse. My mom soon received threats from him and no longer felt safe with the 3 of us in our apartment. Because of him, I began to stay with my dad a lot more. I didn't normally stay with my dad because of his alcoholism, and my mother and sister stayed with my grandmother. As soon as my mom started staying with them, he caught on. Within the first couple of days, my mom had woken up to a broken windshield and a rock on the seat. It was never proven, but we know he did it. After this fiasco, things started to subside a bit, until nothing happened at all. My mother gathered her things as well as my sister, and they moved back to the apartment. Months went by and my mom had heard nothing from Will. I went back to living with my mom and things returned to the way they used to be, except I still would go to stay with my dad on occasion. One of the nights I stayed with my dad, my sister begged my mom for them to spend the night at my grandma's. At first she said no, but after a while gave in and packed up their things for the night. While there, my mom's phone number came up on the caller ID. My mom automatically knew that Will was in the apartment. It took the police no time to get there, seeing as they had been called a few times before regarding Will. When they entered the apartment, all of the lights were off. When they turned them on, they saw him in a chair facing away from them. He got up, thinking it was my family members coming home, and gave the police a clean view of the knife in his hand. Will was hauled off to the police station, while some cops searched the apartment. First they discovered a broken window. It was a first-floor apartment, which is what he used to get in. Then, in the bedroom, they found that alcohol had been poured all over the bed and shards of glass were everywhere. After that came the most chilling discovery, a lighter on the bedside table. While Will was in jail, my mom came to pick me up from my dad's house and take me home one night. She came in to get me, took me out to the car, and strapped me into my car seat in the back. She walked around to the front of the car, and as she started to get into the driver's seat, she noticed a man in the passenger seat. He cursed at her, and as she ran around to the back to get me, he escaped. The cops were called, and although my mom had cash and her medications in plain sight, the only thing taken was some of her personal information, her social security card, or driver's license or something like that. It was obvious to my mother that this man had been hired by Will while he was locked up. Will was released from incarceration after a short amount of time. My mom had taken out a restraining order on him, but that didn't stop him from contacting her again. Will called her and asked for her back again, and my mom of course said no. Desperate to be with her, he took drastic measures to get her attention. He figured if maybe he was hurt, she would feel bad for him and take him back. Using the rationale, he grabbed a gun and shot himself in the leg, knowing it would cause much harm. Little did he know, he shot right into a major vein artery, so he bled to death right on the spot. This story always gives me chills when I hear it. My family never ever told me about this until I was 12. If my sister had not begged to stay with my grandparents out of nowhere, this could be very different for everyone involved.
It was my first night in a new city, and I called my mother to tell her that I had arrived safely. She tells me that the girl I dated when I was 17, as I was now 23, and hadn't heard a peep out of her in 5 years, called out of the blue looking for me and left her lumber. Lonely and bored, I rang her up and had a strange catch-up session. She told me she was engaged to a woman, and that her life after we broke up was a series of unfortunate events. We hung up on pleasant terms, with no plans to keep in touch. 3 days later, I am exiting my building, and who is standing there in the rain, waiting? Yup, her. She had flown 2,500 miles in the middle of the night because she thought we were destined to be together. She told me how she was so torn up about us not being together that she had pulled out all of her pubic hair. She also brought her fiancé, who was as crazy as she, and was urging my ex to have a baby with me. I calmly tried telling her that this was insane and that I had no interest in any of this, when out of nowhere it all goes black. I wake up to chaos, and my doorman is holding the fiancé down waiting for police. Turns out, she'd hit me on the back of the head with a full bottle of champagne that they'd bought to celebrate with us. Arrests were made and restraining orders followed.
In college, a while ago now, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons for some shady friends we had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive, nearly killing me a few times. Needless to say, I get the fuck out. After a few threats and really crazy behaviors, he left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was reading to my dorm after a meeting one night, when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which was right down the street, to get some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around, and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt duck behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening carefully. I heard something moved and wiped around again. There a person, his size, staring at me from behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but just walked a little faster. I'd hear the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare stop or let on that I knew someone, probably him, was there. I knew he owned a gun and would likely pull a bullet into me, given the chance. He was that psycho, and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the union and got some ice cream and just sat there in the store eating, unwilling to go back into the unlit street in case it was my crazy armed ex. I still hadn't mastered the nerve to head back when my phone buzzed. My heart just about fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They'd been walking way behind me when they saw something that alarmed them enough to text me. "Your ex is walking around the street." They called me before I could even text them back. "Where are you? Your ex is prowling around, here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the union. I think he had a gun." "Was he with you? What's going on?" Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me, and I was at the union and was too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not go anywhere, and that they were coming. A few minutes later, they came running into the union, breathless, eyes wide, asking me why he was by my dorm and what had happened. This was probably what scared them the most of all. The boyfriend, who is a black belt in karate and is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched me between them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex had better not try anything. I led the two of them into my dorm, and we went up to my room, where my roommates put in a frantic call to the police. As we peered out, the windows facing the street and side of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees to the side of the dorm, looking up. A street light reflected something in his hand, something shiny. I saw him tag at the 22. I realized he was carrying and looked up. We locked eyes, and I saw something, this kind of rage, in his eyes that froze me. In that moment, I knew he really was out to kill me, and my friends and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran away through the trees, We didn't know whether he would come back and try to break in or something, so we called the police again. And lo and behold, sirens within minutes and officers with guns drawn combined the area. They caught him a few hours later, still with a .22 in hand. He confessed he was, indeed, going to try to kill me if he had had the chance, but he didn't want to take pot shots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I had broken up with him, I was given over to Satan, and he had a duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he could break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after that. I was so afraid and paranoid for years and years. Now, I can be out and about without any fear, but I still have nightmares about him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand and rage in his eyes.
This is my cautionary tale. Please, don't make the same mistake that I made. I was 22 years old, lonely and desperate. And when we're desperate, we don't always see things clearly now, do we? We make stupid decisions and convince ourselves that we deserve anything as long as we're in a relationship. There are far worse things than being single. I found her on Facebook through that suggested friends column. She was 38 years old, and I found her attractive at the time, and interestingly, no longer do. I messaged her, and she responded enthusiastically, and we set up a date. So this is how the first date went down. She immediately told her long, sad story of a traumatic childhood, multiple abusive partners, running away from home, substance abuse, and the fact that nobody understood or respected her. Immediately infuriated with me, insisting that she was head over heels in love and that I was the one. So I went back to her apartment, and I have to say, it was disgusting. I don't know if any of you listening have seen Friends, but there's this one episode where Ross has this beautiful girlfriend, but her apartment looks like they'd taken 8 different trash cans and set it off as a bomb. That is the only comparison I can make. It was a disgusting apartment, piled with garbage. The refrigerator was filled with rotten food, filthy dishes overflowing the sink. She told me she'd been unemployed for a long time and was often let go of jobs because nobody seemed to understand her. I admit it, I was an idiot. My nurturing side took over, and I figured I could help her get back on her feet. People, this is not how you start a healthy relationship. No matter how much you care about someone, a successful romantic partner isn't possible until both partners are generally stable and happy with themselves. A boyfriend and girlfriend is not a professional therapist, housekeeper, or career counselor. She almost never said thank you, never seemed to notice how much work I put into picking up after her, cooking dinner, and trying to cheer her up. She would randomly burst into tears and sob over how miserable her life was, but refused to see a therapist, and insisted that all of them were manipulative people who were just in for it for the money. She texted me just minutes after I left her apartment, always wanting to know where I was, what I was doing, and why I couldn't be with her. I was never at peace. To make matters worse, she didn't just not like, but despised each and every member of my family and every friend I had. Said that I had been a spoilt child and that I needed to learn discipline. Because she was older, she needed to help me grow up, and wanted me to distance myself from my loved ones because they were all selfish and prideful and didn't respect her. Terrifying mood swings that became increasingly common and intense. Gaslighting, lies, and manipulation. Towards the end, she began taking long weekend trips to a town about 20 minutes away. I learnt that she was there to see the sermons of a pastor who was helping her get back on her feet and really wanted me to come and meet him. Turned out the man was a raving lunatic, insisted that Barack Obama had obtained angel DNA and was using it to build an army of invincible soldiers, not to mention being obsessed with the impending rapture. Despised Arabs, Jews, African Americans, pretty much everyone who wasn't a white American to be honest, and was surrounded by a harem of young women who lived in his large home with him. I have no idea why I stayed with her so long. It was almost 3 years. Again, desperation and low self-esteem will do that to you. The final straw was when she had a meltdown at my cousin's wedding in front of our entire family. This occurred 2 states away, so we all had to drive back home with her. She screamed at me so loudly for so long that it looked like blood was coming out of her eyes. She then smashed a huge handful of blueberries into my chest. As soon as I started packing up to leave, she gave me the whole speech about how nobody else would ever love me and that we were soulmates. I noped my way out of there in quick cold turkey. I reconnected with friends, spent lots of time with my family, and rediscovered my true identity. And met the love of my life a few months later. Apparently, she now tells people that I sexually assaulted her.
10 years ago, I dated this guy, David. I don't talk about David much, only to my current partner and very close friends. Talking about him makes me nervous. When David and I met, I was only 17 and he was a post-secondary student in his early 20s. Being a near-homeless gay teenage dropout with raging hormones, a complicated home life, and limited dating prospects, I jumped into a relationship with him. Our relationship progressed very rapidly, and I moved into his Toronto apartment after only a month of dating. I was young and inexperienced with relationships. David was a horrible guy. Of course, in the beginning, it was great. We were in love, very much so. But after a few months, that began to change. One night, after a first minor fight over laundry, I got a glimpse of how angry he could get over a simple matter. That night, I had a dream in which he held a pillow against my face, smothering me until I asphyxiated. His facial expressions contorted in terrifying ways, morphing into the face of a demon. In hindsight, this dream was trying to tell me something. I should have trusted my instincts. 6 months into our relationship, he no longer hid these parts of himself. See, David has bipolar disorder and ignored his diagnosis. In retrospect, I can confidently say he's a sociopath as well. As a teenager, I was not equipped to deal with this. He was incredibly manipulative, eventually keeping me away from my friends and family, especially male co-workers. He stole money from me and put his bills and debts in my name without my consent. I still have horrible credit because of this. He would gaslight me on the strangest things, trying to convince me I was a horrible person. He constantly accused me of cheating, almost daily by the end. He would fly off the handle suddenly. He was often physically violent. I can't exactly remember how long I continued in this relationship. As it is a part of my life, I try hard to forget. But it was around 2 years, maybe a little more. On my first attempt to leave him, he followed me as I left during the night. I passed through a well-lit city park on my way to a friend's place. Before I knew it, I was on the ground with David on top of me, hands around my throat. Thankfully, passerby came to my aid. Don't ask me why I didn't report him for any of this. I was very confused. I really thought he was going to kill me. I didn't tell anyone about the night for years after. He attacked me once more shortly after I left him, when we bumped into each other at a party. I found out later that he had been cheating on me the entire time we were together with multiple people, including my best friend's straight boyfriend. Go figure. Fast forward a few years, I'm dating an awesome guy who I am still with today, and I am working as a charity fundraiser, collecting donations for non-profits on busy Toronto streets. I get angry or strange emails and texts from David once in a while, always changing my phone number and email address when he finds them out. I never responded. I'm informed that he moved to Montreal. I spot him a few times a year stalking me, poking his head out from behind a street corner while I'm working, through my window as he walks around my neighborhood, trying to figure out which house I live in, or around my work office building. It made me very anxious every time. Every so often, he tries to infiltrate whatever group of friends he can connect me to. I see him pop up in social media photos with friends I have recently hung out with, despite living in a different city. I don't know how he was finding out these things about my personal life. However, all of this slows down as time goes on, until a year or so passes with no sign of him, until I get an email last year saying that he wants to talk, briefly about things that happened in our relationship, and I wonder if he wants to apologize. I don't respond, but I message a mutual friend whom I trust to find out how he is doing. My friend warns me that he still obsesses about me often and that his mental health has declined, and they are no longer close friends because of it. He advises me never to speak to him again for both our sake. Out of morbid curiosity and maybe a touch of emotional masochism, I set up a fake Facebook account and creep his profile, sending me into a rabbit hole of links to his Tumblr and beyond. He is an artist now. I found a post with photos of one of his latest works, the creepiest fucking zine I've ever seen. It depicted an extremely bloody scenario and a poem. I don't remember the poem exactly, but it was something about gruesomely murdering a boy who didn't love him back, describing the death in detail, and contending that he deserved it. I'm more than a little uneasy at this point. I'm actually scared. 80 years is more than enough time to get over your ex. This was obsession, to an alarming level. I changed my email once more and asked a mutual friend to keep me updated if he ever decides to take a trip to my city. I also deleted my Facebook and most of my social media accounts, and I haven't seen any sign of him in over a year. I'm 25 now. I have worked through a lot of the issues that David left inside of me. Now I have a really kick-ass partner and a squishy cat. I'm a university student and my life has been pretty rad. Still, I'm always expecting to get an email or to see him down the street. I sometimes wonder if this is over or if anything will change when he tracks me down again. Maybe he is simply biding his time. So, yeah, let's not meet stalker ex-boyfriend David ever again. And if you ever read this, consider it my closure on a trash relationship and get some help.
I was in a pretty good relationship with a girl that I didn't know had a drinking problem, but she was sober while I was with her. We lived far apart, but I was enjoying my time with her, so I moved to be closer to her. I guess that was too much. She completely cut contacts with me, with no explanation, which was obviously upsetting and confusing. She didn't answer my calls, and her roommates told me to piss off when I went to her place. I gave her more space than I really wanted to, and tried to communicate with her again for months. She agreed to let me meet with her a couple of times, but then cancelled. Then she sent me an email, accusing me of all sorts of terrible things. I definitely would have preferred to discuss those issues in person. But having been hurt and confused and incommunicado for so long, I responded immediately with an angry message. She removed her initial insults and forwarded an edited version of my email to all our mutual friends with a message about how I was threatening her. Okay, message received. Bitches be crazy. Time to move on. About a month later, a detective knocks on my door investigating an abuse claim. Supposedly, I'm threatening to kill her. I give an official statement of my version and tell them truthfully that she's moved and I made no effort to discover her new address or phone number, and that I have no contact with her and no intentions of making contact with her, and that I never made any of the threats she claimed. They encouraged me to file a countersuit, and I'm like, are you kidding? I have a new girlfriend already, I just want to move on. She needs help, that I obviously can't provide, and tells people she had a restraining order against me, which isn't true, but I let it go. So anyway, time to forget and move on, right? About a year later, I get invited to the birthday party of a dear friend, who also invited the crazy ex. I didn't know this, but the crazy ex is in the kitchen making pasta when I arrive with my new girlfriend. The crazy ex throws boiling hot pasta and boiling water at the birthday girl, and thankfully it misses. She storms out the back door, and she's not over it, I guess. The funny thing is, I was always good to her, and even on this occasion I tried to be nice to her, and tried talking with her about it, but she lost it. I literally did nothing to her. A few months after, I see her on the street, with her new boyfriend. She sees me, and I get a look of pure hatred. She immediately crosses the street to avoid walking past me, actually shoving her confused-looking boyfriend into moving traffic. I felt really sorry for him. I don't think he stuck around that long. About a year after that, I get curious about her and wonder if she's in the paper on murder charges, and Google her name. I find a beautiful song she wrote and filmed and uploaded to YouTube with a few views about being crazy and throwing away her relationships. I'm moved to tears and write her a short message, but of course I never hear back. I think it must be incredibly tiring being so crazy.
It was June of 2015, and when I met Tyler, I had just turned 20 and my parents were going through a nasty divorce. So to be said, I was having some issues. It wasn't long before Tyler had me wrapped around his finger. Within the first couple of months of knowing dating him, I started to see red flags. My mom and sister don't like him at all, and neither did any of my friends. He was very jealous and insecure. It started off with him telling me what I should and shouldn't be wearing, to bringing up my issues and using them against me. I am not going to go all into detail because that would take about 5 pages front and back of how crazy he was. Anyways, around December of 2015, Tyler started to log into my social media accounts and was pretending to be me. He would message guys I knew and flirt with them. What the fuck? And message my best friend trying to start unnecessary drama. Obviously, I found out about it and confronted him. His excuse was that he was bored and wanted to see what they would say and thought it was funny. Who does that? Well, I told Tyler to stop, and if he didn't, then I wasn't going to keep being in a relationship with him. Shocker, he didn't stop. Anyways, it only took me a couple of months later, February 2016, to finally break up with this nut job. Because of the person I am, I still was trying to be nice to him. Bad idea. Unfortunately, I led him into thinking he had a chance to get back with me. He didn't. I told him over phone that we would never get back together, which made him freak out. He started threatening me, saying things like, "You'll regret this," or Watch your back, bitch. I cut all contact with him after that, well, at least until March 28th, 2016. The day I'll never forget. It was 6:45 in the morning, and I was walking out the door of my house to leave for work. My driveway is about 1/10 of a mile, long and on each side of the driveway, and trees lining it. So one way in and one way out. It's dark outside, and I am driving down the driveway, and guess who is blocking me in? Tyler. I'm getting agitated now. He gets out his car and walks to mine. I roll my window down enough to where he can hear me and tell him to beat it. I have to get to work. For about 5 minutes of bickering back and forth, he finally says, "Okay, just give me one last kiss and I'll go." Feeling like I'm out of options, I cave it and say fine. Well, as I kiss him goodbye, he unlocks my door, since my window was down now, and opens my car door. He is standing in between the door and me. Now, it's obvious he isn't leaving. He proceeded to tell me that I was going to text my boss to tell him I'm not coming into work. Then after I was to text my boss that we were going in his car and leaving this place for good. Yeah, not happening. Since I wasn't going to do any of that, Tyler reaches over and tries to grab my phone from me. Now we're out of the car, wrestling for my phone. I punched him in the face. I don't promote violence, but he deserved it. And he lets go of my phone. I'm crying, begging him to just go and leave me alone. This is the part where he goes and says, "I really hate to do this," and pulls out a gun that was tucked in the back part of his pants. Shit. My adrenaline is pumping and my brain is going about 1,000 miles per second. I'm trying to stay cool and walk back to my car. I'm now sitting in the driver's seat with Tyler standing in between the door and I again. I asked him, "What the hell are you doing?" And he's waving the pistol all around. He tells me he doesn't know and that he is sorry. He slipped up and told me the gun wasn't loaded, so I took this as an opportunity to get the hell out. While he's standing there, I put my car in reverse and gunned it. He stumbled back enough for me to be able to shut and lock my door. Since it's light outside now, I can see that there's just enough room for me to drive my car into a ditch and hope to make it out. I never prayed so hard for my life. I put my car back in drive and floored it. I made it into the road and see Tyler running to his car. He's now gaining speed behind me, goes around and speeds off. Now would be the time to call 911, right? Well, I was too out of it to think about that. I get to work and immediately go to my boss and tell him what happened. I ended up calling my mom and she called the 911. I leave work and go home and talk to the officers. I ended up taking out warrants for his arrest. He was charged with trespassing, assault on a female, and assault with pointing a gun. I also got restraining order. Unfortunately, it doesn't end here. Now, it's around May of 2016. I started to see him following me while I'm driving to and from work. There was nothing I could do since it was a public road. This was going on for about 3 weeks. I had enough of it. One afternoon, my sister was in the car with me as I was going to take her to her appointment. Well, here comes Tyler in his stupid white car behind me, so I had my sister videotape him and called 911. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot and got him arrested. He spent the night in jail for breaking the restraining order, had to go to court against him, and ended up just settling for him to do community service and take anger management classes. Thankfully, after the night he spent in jail, he has left me alone since. Tyler has a new girlfriend now, so thankfully I'm old news. What scares me the most is that I didn't even know him for a whole year and all this happened. So crazy stalker ex-boyfriend, let's not meet again. Ever.
Bonus story. I met the most amazing guy. We had so much fun together. We both wake up in the morning, have a little hug and a kiss, and then he pops off into the shower. As he does so, as I usually did, I went into the wardrobe, ironed his shirt, did the bed, and then lovingly laid out the clothes that he would be wearing on the bed just in time for him to get out. He was still in the shower, and at that point I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There was a lump in his blazer jacket. I checked it out. I was both excited and concerned. You see, we'd only been dating for 6 months. Of course, it was a ring. I tried on that ring and was very anxious, and then put it back. I hope he didn't notice. I didn't say anything, and he leaves for work and we do the normal kiss kiss, I love you. And there I was now thinking what to wear, wondering how he's gonna do it. Now normally, I would call and message him if he leaves his iPad at my place, or if he forgets anything. But, well, after seeing the ring, I was feeling a little bit snoopy. So I log into his iPad. He didn't even have a passcode, and his Facebook is still open. I'm just scrolling through arbitrarily. And then I see it. There are pictures of him with another girl. According to Facebook, they had been in a relationship for 4 years. 4 years. I checked my phone and realized there is the smallest change in surnames. And comparing the two accounts, one is like his real life and the other is an obvious fake. When we met, he told me, "Oh, bae, I don't really use Facebook." And that's where he got me. I check his iMessages, and they're in love, and they're going to dinner tonight. Well, screw him, I say. Now normally I would just go F this shit and leave, but today I was feeling extra vengeful. Every single picture I had of him and I posted using his account and tagging her in every picture. Plus, I tagged his mates that met me, knew me, ate dinner with us, and I made a status update that he had been cheating for the past 6 months, and I sent her a direct Facebook message and phone message, and it was seen at 11:43 a.m. The message detailed how we met, how long he knew me for, and who knew. I met his parents. I'm waiting for a locksmith to change the lock. So I went to get coffee with the woman a bit after, and it's obvious that we're his type. We almost look exactly the same. We had a chat, but she was a bit emotionless. And yes, she ended up dumping him, as well as me. He called me that night and called me a whore and ended the call. I've never felt so infuriated or betrayed in my life. He is the worst ex I've ever had. And honestly, I'm just glad I found out soon enough. Who knows how long he could have kept that going for? Could he have been married, had kids with this woman, and still have me stringing along on the side? Me thinking that one day he'll propose, when he's got this whole other life. I honestly don't know how he managed to successfully pull off having a girlfriend, a mistress, and a job. I could barely hold down a job in a relationship, and yet he managed to do all that. Some people, seriously.